joining us, Grantee. And before you go totally on mute, do you want to kick us off with just giving us a couple little high overview of your work at the Lavender Rights Project? And then when you're done, you can feel free to popcorn it to one of the other panelists.
Beautiful. Perfect. Okay, so 3 minutes. Oof. Okay, so I am the development associate for the Lavender Rights Project, which is, yes, a buy-in for legal services and social services organization here in Washington. I was brought onto this work. I've been doing nonprofit work my whole life as a teaching artist and educator. But when the pandemic happened, I sadly had to take a step back from educating because everyone wanted a virtual class and there's only one me. And I knew I wasn't trying to be underpaid, trying to do virtual classes, and I'd rather be underpaid doing nonprofit work. So I luckily found a job through Lavender Rights Project on the Washington Black Trans Task Force. Our executive director, Jalen Scott, formed a task force of Black trans women femmes who are social workers, artists, sex workers, healers, the 9, and there's about 7 of us who started, and we started a task force to address the crisis of violence that was happening in King County, Washington. And we found that homelessness and houselessness was one of the main things that led to the vulnerability, to the violence, to the murders that we are seeing. Seattle is one of the fastest growing cities in the nation, and with that means the gentrification is so whiffed as fuck. And so it is super expensive to be here. We have the most cranes in the sky. We have the most, housing disparities amongst all races, but we know that Black trans women and non-binary femmes aren't safe in shelters that are currently available, aren't safe going to social services, aren't getting the legal help, legal advice, legal advocacy. People are getting fired wrongfully at their jobs, due to so many things surrounding disability, surrounding race, surrounding access. And so the Washington Black Trans Task Force, this program through Lavender Rights Project, started this housing initiative that everyone deserves a home. And I, as a development associate, I assist my development director in, talking to our donors, making sure our donors and our donations align with our mission. I ran my first campaign with my organization actually this month in September. It's the final day to bring more awareness to this 5th year of that LRP abbreviation, Lavender Rights Project, is entering to this new year. We have a new mission, a new vision, targeting gender diverse populations. We are now a mostly predominantly Black and brown organization than what it was 5 years ago when 2 white queer people started the organization. So we've been really shaping and transforming as the pandemic's been happening, as everything's been just being ready, more available. The George Floyd uprising really got a lot of people's eyes on a lot of Black trans organizations, and we were one of them. So we were thankful for a lot of the influx of donations and support that was happening. But obviously we're in October 1st, basically, and that support has definitely died down and that energy is not there like it used to be. So we're still here. We've been doing this work continuously. And so that's just a little bit of what I do at the Lavender Rights Project with the Washington Black Trans Task Force, which is a recipient of the Social Justice Fund grant. So thank you so much for supporting us. I actually wrote this grant as well. I'm not going to toot my own horn. I wear many hats. But yeah, that's just me. I love this work. I would, again, much rather be in service to my community. Being surrounded by Black queer people, disabled people, Indigenous people is my jam. And you'll never see me working a 9-to-5 ever again. So I'm gonna pass it off to Mady.
Hi everyone. I am a co-founder and co-executive director of FIRE. So we're a new youth center in rural Okanogan County. We're actually the largest county in Washington state by land mass, but incredibly rural, deeply under-resourced, and it's super conservative here, which is tough. I actually vowed to never come home. Never went to high school to pick up my diploma, but here the F I am, so whatever. I came home. My brother was really having a hard time coming out as queer, and so he needed some extra support. I knew that the high school was pretty horrible, and I had a pretty horrible experience with that as well. So came home and decided to start working with young people. I ran a girls group in juvenile detention, which I think in 2016, we locked up Native American girls at the highest rate in our country. Here, we have a large Indigenous population and Latinx population. yeah, and then COVID hit and I'm no longer allowed to go into juvenile detention, and our young people aren't allowed to leave their cells. And so I would try and catch them when they were out, but then we had nowhere safe to meet or nowhere confidential, and they're facing houselessness and all these things. And none of these systems were working for them, and they were written off as like bad kids, or they chose to be this. And then there's this whole sex trafficking ring that literally I was calling the FBI and law enforcement, and we know that that's like detrimental anyways. But there was no help and there was nowhere to go, and I was scared for them. And so we kind of hit this breaking point. So my co-founder is my aunt, who's also in social services and grew up here, and my sister. So we're like, what would it look like? What would it look like to start a youth center that is ran by brown people and serves young people? And it does everything, because we have some resources here, but it is white led and they do not connect or understand like cultural responsiveness. So those programs don't work for our young people. And so actually, thanks to the seed grant from Social Justice Fund Northwest, and then 2 other very small grants, we were able to open our doors. So I quit my job and we opened our doors with $15,000 in our account and like just a dream. But in that time, we were connecting young people to larger conversations and demanding a spot at the table in local and regional and statewide conversations. We started getting grant funding. And then some of our young people who were experiencing homelessness went on this panel and fought for us. And then FIRE got $3.3 million from Washington State to start our first independent living learning center here. We also, we've worked with over 300 young people now across our county. We see anywhere from 35 to 70 young people in our building, and we do anything and everything. So we call ourselves problem solvers. We tell teachers and community members and social service workers, like, if you just see that your kid is having a hard time and you can't identify what it is and they can't identify what it is, send them here anyways, because we want to build that relationship and get to know them and have them feel supported. So we do a lot of housing stuff. We do substance use disorders and like fast track to treatment centers and Suboxone. We have free Narcan here. We help with teen parenting, mental health needs, trying to figure out some non-traditional counseling methods because it doesn't work for our young people. Education and employment, GED testing, life skills workshops, getting documentation. We have a free food pantry. We have a whole like thrift shop in the back, but everything is free. We have new hygiene products. And then we run multiple youth leadership groups. Some are tied to like the state, some are tied to the county, and some are tied just to FIRE. So there are little leaders and tell us what to do, and they boo our outreach materials because we're not hip, and then they code switch for us. So we're really reaching our target population. And so we have grown so much so quickly, and we're nearing our 1-year anniversary. October 27th is the day. And it's been incredible. And we're so thankful for the people that took a chance on us. Cause you know, I was like, I don't know, like I have a plan. And I grew up here, and I promise I'll make it come to fruition, but I just need you to believe me, but you don't know me. So SJF NW was one of those. I really appreciate it. And we're so happy to be here. So happy for our young people and ourselves, and like this collective healing and generational healing that we're working on together. And I will pass it to Nisha.
I swear I'm so loyal. I'm like diehard for revolutionaries and change makers and caretakers. We talked all together. SJF got us together to talk as panelists and meet one another and connect with each other before the big event. And since then, I've been going up to people like, yeah, Mady, there's up 350 young people. So I love hearing about y'all's work. It's super empowering and the good kind of contagious in this era. So I would love to talk to y'all about the work of the Black Liberation Collective. We are a small team of organizers based in Idaho. And Lord, do we have our work cut out for us, y'all. Believe it or not, there are in fact Black people in Idaho, and we focus all of our work into our community. We know that the people who are here face just slews of violence. There's all sorts of violence. We have white supremacy groups who are alive and well. They're quite literally out there in broad daylight. And so the way that the Black Liberation Collective works here is very much so with resistance, but also with restoration. We know that we want to push back, but we also know that we want to fill each other up and love on each other really tender and really sweet in the meantime. So what that actually looks like in our day-to-day work, we do everything. We do everything. We have mutual aid that we focus on that is both financial and non-financial. We work in influencing different decisions, whether it is with different school boards, whether it's going on with legislation. We work to just make sure that people feel empowered and informed. We were getting all sorts of dirty. We had a community garden, but it was a big garden. We had a community farm. That was pretty interesting. That was a fun adventure. We create zines and different learning materials so that people can have accessible information for police alternatives. We have teaching spaces where we go ahead and inform people about whatever is happening in community. We do care packages for different organizers across movements because we understand that not a lot of people get roses while they're here, and not a lot of people get thanks and gratitude for the work that we do. We create spaces and events for celebration. We have created one of the biggest celebrations for Juneteenth in the Northwest. We mourn together. We have spaces where we worship and practice the moon cycles together. We do anything, we do everything because we really hold community, and we come from community. So we understand that we've got to be informed by community. If our people are needing this, that's exactly who we're going to be this day. If we need to pivot and shift into something different, that's exactly who we're going to be. So it makes me very excited to be a part of the BLC team. Black Liberation Collective is advised by my comrade Ty, who is in the space with us, Black Indigenous Mimi Pooh storyteller. She helps us so much with everything that we do. And then the team ourselves, we are Black, African, resettled, disabled, queer, trans, you name it, we got it. And we are serving all of that with a lot of abundance. So I would love to pass it to find out a little bit more about the work that y'all do. So I guess I will pass it to Miss Randy.
Randy went first.
Yeah, you went first, boo.
Claire, you want to?
Say you good, you good.
Sure, I can go. So I work for ShelterJH, and ShelterJH was started back in 2016 when there was simultaneously a huge apartment complex here, and the rents went up about 40% overnight with about 1,200 units. And then also in town, there was a trailer park that got replaced by a luxury hotel, which is kind of an epidemic here in Jackson, in a tourist town. So while that was happening, the founders of ShelterJH got together and recognized that even though there's Habitat for Humanity, there's a public housing department, there's another community housing trust, which is another private nonprofit. All of those groups build units that are deed restricted for local workers at different income levels, but none of those groups engage in advocacy. So none of them really stick their neck out and advocate for new public funding streams or for lowering the income restrictions for different kinds of units. So ShelterJH won't really engage in building units, but we are an advocacy group that works directly with politicians and members of the community. And the reason why we're unique is because there's probably over 300 nonprofits here in Teton County. Almost all of them are directed towards wildlife or wildlands conservation, different environmental causes. Of course, housing is an environmental cause, but more natural conservation goals. So we were incorporated as a C4 nonprofit. So we actually are able to endorse candidates. We're able to get a lot more directly involved during election season. So last year, election season was very, very exciting. I worked for other nonprofits before, and we definitely have to tiptoe around subjects during election season. So it was pretty eye-opening to be able to talk openly with our members and with supporters and with opponents about who we supported and why we did or didn't. 3 out of the 5 people that we endorsed for office are now in office in different local public offices. And now our job is to give them the political backing that they need to make tough decisions. And for example, one of the decisions that they just made, which is a step in the right direction, nothing that will seriously move the needle, but definitely something that we wanted to see happen, was now DACA recipients are eligible for ownership units through our public housing department. They used to be only eligible for rental units. So that was actually a unanimous decision made on a town and county level here locally. So that was really exciting. We also worked locally to advocate for another position in our public housing department, and that just got funded as well. So in such a conservative state, there's very little that we can do on a local level because a lot of our taxes are controlled on a state level, and so many of the decisions that we can make on a local level can be overturned at the state level because Teton County is a small little progressive bubble in a very, very conservative state. So it's happened multiple times where we've passed different ordinances and legislation on a local level that legislators at the state have basically outlawed, and then we're back to square one. So we have a pretty unique challenge here in Wyoming, but our membership has grown immensely since I've been onboarded about a year and a half ago. ShelterJH used to just be completely run by volunteers, and of course, a lot of those volunteers had to move away because they didn't have a place to live. So the board really focused on fundraising, and then we're able to hire me, and I'm the only employee, and I work part-time. So we're a very new organization and trying to grow as much as we can, but we have a very, very important role to play in as the only housing advocacy organization in a community where housing is the #1 issue. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm privileged to be surrounded by so many passionate people.
Thank you.
And Fatmah, I think, is last.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, everyone. A little bit about Momentum Alliance. That name is a work in progress. One day we'll change it. Momentum Alliance previously was started by a white older Jewish lady who was working with Latinx youth in East Portland. And so the organization kind of became something different. But DACA and undocumented youth issues has always been a part of Momentum Alliance's identity. So we still work on that stuff just in different ways. Currently, Momentum Alliance is a youth of color social justice nonprofit. So it's led by and for youth of color. We have youth board members, youth staff, youth participants. That's what we do. We've worked on a number of policies and issues in the past that I will not go into, but you could look into it if you want to. Momentum Alliance's identity has slowly began to change from public policy and advocacy and working within the state to kind of shifting away from that and trying to do more internal work. Because, you know, when you want to invite a friend over, you got to clean up your house. So we got to work on ourselves first. So we've become a lot smaller than what we used to be. And we're slowly shifting into hopefully, if it works out, a Black youth space only. So that's kind of something that we're working towards. But yeah, we work with youth and we are youth. We kind of just go with the flow. We take it day by day. We're doing less of the performative shit. We're doing less of the asking and doing more of the building with each other, because that's really what matters at the end of the day. We're just learning as we go, because, you know, we're the youth. We don't got any expectations, and we're just learning. So one of the major things that we've worked on this year, just so you all get an idea, is we've done a COVID-19 financial relief. We had some extra money from not doing programming during the first year of COVID. So MA and their youth decided that they wanted to give money to youth because folks were struggling during the first year. So we gave out $70K, and we're right now fundraising again. And our goal is to give out another $50 to $70K to youth. And this money is just cash money. You spend it how you want to spend it. Most of the folks that are getting their money are survivors of DV or homelessness and or experiencing homelessness currently. So that's kind of where our money is going right now. Sorry about that. And the next step is just to keep giving money. I think that we can sit here and have a conversation about like, what's going on? Let's have a debrief. Let's do this. Let's do that. But sometimes folks are just exhausted and they just need what they need. And so that's kind of like what we're just gonna do, at least in the next upcoming year. Is just give out money where it's needed, keep our mouths shut, and just take care of each other. That's it. What happens next is what happens next. Yeah. That's a little bit about MA.
Thank you for that. It's great hearing y'all. There's like a through line through all of your work in a bunch of different ways, which leads us nicely into our first question for the panel. And either of you can take this, so don't all hop in at one time, but somebody hop in. Like the first question we have for the group is, how does solidarity with others, so others being community organizations, activists, artists, how does solidarity with others push forward the work you do?
I can jump in. And with that, I can also kind of, just trickle in on how LRP has found solidarity with other organizations here in Washington. And so I'm not sure if I mentioned it before in my debrief, but LRP started off as a legal services, pro bono services for LGBTQ folks services. So we have a team of lawyers and attorneys who, provide services in family law, work harassment cases, et cetera, stuff like that. We used to do immigration, but we don't anymore. And then in 2019, when the Black Trans Task Force formed, we have this new vision of housing now. And so, of course, we weren't the only organization working towards housing. There's also the Chief Seattle Club over here. There's also Queer the Land, who just got their house also for Black, queer, trans folks, which is amazing. There's also the Trans Women of Color Solidarity Network, who provides direct relief aid, which is a model that our Washington Black Trans Task Force also models after, providing direct relief aid towards Black trans women and femmes who are struggling with rent, food, housing, et cetera, really. And so really solidarity is just knowing that you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time, and you can kind of just learn from who's already doing it and then seeing what's in your lane and navigate that way. And one of the things LRP has done going into this 5th year is like, how do we combine now what we originally were doing, which is pro bono legal services, with now this direct relief towards Black, trans, Indigenous folks, and how do we merge? And we have like this new now mission and vision, and we do retreats. We did our first retreat, and we're also 100% remote. I forgot to also mention that in my thing. We have not been in the office together since the pandemic because a lot of our employees and staff are disabled and have immune compromised. And so we're on Zoom, like literally all the time, just in meetings, talking, have caucuses around how we can do better as an organization with each other. And really, finding what that solidarity is internally so that we can project it outward. Because again, as an organization that had white origins, didn't have the best, structure and infrastructure to carry out to, now hire on people of color. So we have to actually go in, interrogate ourselves, ask ourselves those hard questions. How do we fail? How are we failing? And then how can we move forward? Who's doing this work? How can we model after them? How can we join in them? How can we partner and collaborate and amplify their work so that we're not, being like, oh, this new organization, give them their flowers. But it's like, but there's been people doing this again before we decided to hop on the bandwagon. You can't just forget about what's already been happening. And so I definitely want to make sure I put that in there. And that's one of the ways in which LRP, we keep solidarity as a holistic approach to honor the indigeneity here, especially on occupied Duwamish Coast Salish territory. Real rent Duwamish, the Duwamish are still not federally recognized and still can't pay their damn rent. And, so how are we going to get people, how are we going to, then navigate in a way that white supremacists do by going into neighborhoods and like, okay, we're going to put something here, unbeknownst to you all though, so it's like, you have to really like, again, interrogate, ask those questions, recognize what hasn't been happening, and see how we can, again, not perpetuate white supremacy, even as a Black trans organization. So that's just one of the ways in which Lavender Rights Project has, kept solidarity as a holistic approach to the work that we're doing now, advocating for the Black, trans, and gender diverse communities.
Boo, I love what you said about just understanding that like there are people who are fresh out the gate, they're ready, they're super, super ripe. And then there's people who have also been doing this work for a long time. And I really think that we need both of that. We need all of that. I don't think that that's a binary. But I love that. And I think when I think of working together and solidarity, how it pushes our work forward, it just really made me think about how much our solidarity informs us of like where we've been, where we could go. One of my comrades always says, together we know a lot. And I just love that we can be really creative when we work together. We can be really inventive. And Idaho needs a lot of that ingenuity. We have to be really creative, because if it's not the swarm and the mass of white supremacists who are hanging out downtown every weekend, we're leading COVID rates, and we can't really gather in person as much as we'd like to. So I think that that's one thing I like a lot. Together we know a lot, whether it's where we're guiding our compass and how we're pursuing our North Star of total liberation. But I also think solidarity really pushes forward our work, because we get tired, y'all. And I know that this whole entire Zoom group probably knows that really intimately. So when I think of solidarity, my comrades and I, we think of an analogy of how we are like a choir, and how when one voice goes down, like another voice comes up to harmonize. And I really like the way that solidarity allows us to be really nimble and to be really agile, because white supremacy will change how it looks time and time again. So I love that as I'm taking a nap, as I'm drinking water and all of the things that I need to, there's somebody else who's recognizing what that looks like and catering to that, but also moving ahead of that, so that we're not just always being reactive to white supremacy, we're also being proactive. So those were some of the things that you brought up for me. I'd love to hear what else felt resonant for other folks. Didn't mean to starstruck, y'all.
A little starstruck is good, no worries.
Yeah, I mean, I guess back on the stars, but come on, y'all.
I really love your analogy about the choir, thinking about the harmony, like what it looks like to like really be in the movement and in the rhythm with other people, and with the people first, right? Like your class can do whatever it is, but really being in it with the people. So that's a great analogy for solidarity. I see your comment in there too, Burke. I really love that. It's sitting with me right now. Any of the other panelists want to say something, or should I toss out the next question? Great, I'm gonna do it. In the past year, how have you seen people hold each other up in community and hold each other up in the fight for social justice within your work?
I'll jump into this real quick. It's kind of off the point of what Nisha and Randy were talking about, and just like that harmony component. I don't think we think about this often, or like we think beyond, but like solidarity is sustainability in some sense, because it's sustaining the body, it's sustaining the mind, and it's sustaining the community, because you're harmonizing, you're vibing off of each other, and you're not overexerting yourselves. And I think that in like the past year, I mean, I would say in the past year, not just within Momentum Alliance's work in general, but also just like within the community work that I've been doing outside. I've seen the ways that we have just stepped in for one another, just through our communication as a community, or lack of communication. I think exhaustion is a form of communication as well. And so like when we see each other communicate, like being exhausted, we've been able to show up for one another, take space, and just find out how to like how to love one another. And I think that's one of the biggest ways of being a community, is just taking care of one another. Sometimes we don't have to do external community work of like working with city, or working on this, or working on that platform, or working on this policy. I think sometimes just taking care of one another is one of the biggest ways that we can do that as a community. And with MA as an organization, I think that's one of the things that we've really focused on this year is just that, taking care of that mind, body, and spirit really, and being more present with one another. And I'll add to it a little bit later, but I do have to hop off real quick for somebody. So BRB.
No worries. Mady, you have any thoughts on this question?
Yeah, this one's actually, it's hard because we're in such a rural conservative area. So when I think about my small little community, it is really hard to feel this. And yeah, our allies, it's oftentimes not safe for them to be loud, and people who oppose us are so loud. But I think the way that we felt the most solidarity and like community lifting up is just so many other organizations reaching out to us and then like hauling us along to these large conversations that we're not typically invited to, like our community. And so meeting with senators and being part of like legislation and working with OSB, like other partners have really propelled us forward. And I also think like the beauty of like the solidarity and other BIPOC organizations is like we understand the need to like share. And so like elevating each other in grants and not being like holding it for myself, but just like wanting to share. I want you to have this and I want me to have this. And if we don't both get it, then this is a bigger problem about like, where's this money and why isn't it going here? And this is where it needs to go. So I just feel like we've been so supported by other BIPOC organizations in Washington state and like them wanting us to be there with them in these large conversations and represented. That's just been beautiful.
I love that. I love the way you talk about like, or sometimes we forget that like solidarity is not just, where we show up, but how we can bring people along, how do we make sure we're amplifying the voices and the cause and the work? How are we making sure we get people who need to be at the table? How we pull people along to the resources we have access to. So I really love just blowing out really like what that looks like to be in solidarity with one another. Claire, do you want to hop in here or do you want me to toss to the next question? How are you feeling?
I can just touch on something briefly. I think because I started at ShelterJH right before COVID hit, and the main part of my job is doing outreach and building membership, just because we've had so many amazing locals join this organization. I was really waiting for everybody to meet each other and really kind of chomping at the bit to hold an event where everybody could see how passionate each other are, because I think the lack of knowing other people who are on your page, it can be really isolating. It can be one of the things that really leads to pessimism around such huge problems like this. So this August, we were able to finally have a story slam, and it was an event that I really wanted to have, without a main call to action, without a main purpose other than just everybody meeting each other and sharing stories. And some were really hard stories and some were more hilarious stories about everybody's different housing experiences. And we were able to co-host it with a community safety group, and a lot of their members and supporters told stories about police brutality in the community. So it was just a great way for everybody to get together, and we kind of slid in right between two big peaks here in Teton County. So it was pretty lucky, but it's a great way that we were all physically able to come together and show each other that we support each other. So that was one of my favorite things I've done since being here at Shelter.
I love that. Thank you for offering that into the space. So we know that just over the last 18 months, almost 2 years, we've all dealt with a different level of challenges and seeing just the climate of the world really shift. And so this next question, while we understand that all of you are working on causes that have been causes and needs that existed pre-pandemic and have existed fundamentally and systemically for years, just wondering, how have you dealt with the challenges or frustrations over the past year? What perspectives have you gained, if you've gained from them, if at all? And then if you want to talk about how the challenges or your perspective has informed your movement work as a whole.
I swear, like, some of the things that are coming up for me is the last year has taught me a lot about rest. And I think rest has come up a few times in this conversation. Whether it was exhaustion or whether it was like reclaiming our like restoration and our wholeness. But I think that there's been a lot of fatigue and there's been a lot of burnout. So I think that that's been something that's been really frustrating in the last year. Randy had also touched on how 18 months ago, Black liberation was super sexy. Everybody wanted a piece of it. Everybody wanted to be in on it. So it's been really frustrating, especially like in the last few months, having similar spaces that we did a year ago and realizing that like the turnout is next to nothing. The donations that we've received were next to nothing. And so I think that that's been another big frustration. And the list can go on and on. I in the last year have acquired and developed PTSD from the things that we've understood in organizing. And I think that like, I'm grateful to like know that and recognize it now, but I know a lot of my siblings and comrades have really similar experiences that they haven't been able to lean into yet. So I think of a list of things that I don't necessarily want to bullet point out for y'all tonight, but through all of that, I've let it radicalize me. I've let it piss me off. I'm not gonna just have those days where we smile through it and it's not good and tomorrow's a new day. I've let myself get mad. I've let myself get sad. I've let myself log off and set boundaries that I didn't really know if I could set. So I think that when I think of how I've let the frustrations change my perspective, I think that I just let it radicalize me. I've learned to let it radicalize me, and I've learned that that's okay. It's okay to be soft. It's okay to be tough. It's okay to be hard, and all of those things are actually more synonymous than I think we oftentimes let them be.
We love that, and thank you for incorporating that. What I didn't say was also what does healing look like over the past challenge. So I like the idea of like letting it radicalize me as part of my healing, is part of the healing. So I love that.
Radicalization has been the cure. It's the medicine. It's the medicine.
Thank you. Any of the other panelists want to speak to some of the challenges you've dealt with over the last year, perspectives you've gained?
I'll go after Randy.
Okay, yes. Thank you, Nisha. Yeah, I have learned as a non-binary Black trans femme that I do not have to be the savior of the world. Like, I'm not here to have the weight of saving the world and undoing white supremacy. That is white people's job to do that. It is not my job. It is not my lot in life. That is not my baggage to carry. I have other bags to carry, and that is not one of them. It is not our job. I feel like, especially last year, there were so many people say, we need to get Black trans women present in these things. But it's like, you didn't hit us up the months ago you were planning this. You hit us up the day before the event, and you want me to do what? Drop everything that I've been doing for who? Just so you can say you had me there? Because again, it is September, damn near October 2021, and we are not getting those same emails that we were getting. I'm not getting those same texts of, oh, I care about you. Are you okay? Like, I also have developed a huge, PTSD. I'm traumatized from last year because of this. It was really weird. It was really weird. And I don't think a lot of us have the space to talk about honestly, how weird all of that was, especially as someone in Seattle, who navigated a lot of white nonprofit spaces, a lot of white dance spaces, a lot of white teaching spaces. And just for people to still be underpaying us, I'm sorry, I saw an organization raise $10,000 for Black Lives Matter last year. They can still be doing that monthly, daily. People got burnt out real quick and realizing, oh, this is real. I'm like, it's been real. And you want Black women and Black trans women to just stop, just to be there, to be your cheerleaders. No, who's taking care of us? Crickets, So I've also learned to really set boundaries, to say no and not feel bad about it, to recognize that solidarity is not, oh, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. No, you help with no expectation of something in return. No, that is not equity, this is not a, tit for tat type of thing. And it might sound punitive, but it's just been really real, I'm not, I give a lot of white people the eyebrow, I really do. And a lot of non-Black people the eyebrow as well. I'm just I don't, and it's just like, I can't not unsee it now that I saw it, you know, like you just can't unsee it. And again, like people are navigating the pandemic as if it's over, you know, and it's just like, oh, we're still in it. And a lot of people have been navigating a pandemic before the pandemic. There have been no resources for a while, and people just want to go back to living their lives and living normally and just forgetting, you know, that, like, but no, some people don't get to forget. You know, some people do not have the luxury of escaping this reality. You know, some of us are afraid to literally step outside still, you know, and so it's just, yeah, I've definitely learned to center my rest. Even getting sick just recently, I'm like, oh, I still need to get some more sleep and more rest, you know, like, and continue that, and, you know, and talk to myself honestly about what I don't want to do, you know, and like what I do want to do. And rest has been number one on my list, you know, like really resting, you know. One of the things that I love to do is, like, before we even talk about business, like, how are you? Where are you coming from today? You know, what happened right before you clicked enter? You know, like, were you bawling? Were you crying? Were you having a panic attack? You know, like, I don't want to remove that, but I just want to make sure we acknowledge that, yo, we're coming from a traumatic ass world and trying to put a smile into this little box, you know, for the sake of, you know, liberation. And it's like, some people, we have to realize that we're humans, even as activists and revolution. Like, we are humans, you know, and we feel and we hurt, we're insecure, we're lonely, we're terrified, you know. And I just definitely thank God I have access to therapy, you know, that I can really process and really, like, you know, really interrogate that for myself. And I just think about everyone else who doesn't have that, you know, like, and then I realized too, like, some people don't even have that, like, just realizing even that I have some privilege, you know, being employed, you know, some people still are not working and still have not been able to work, you know, and some people are still behind in their rent, you know. So there's just a lot of things. It's very complex. It's not black and white. It's not, everything is so nuanced. I realized that multiple truths can exist at once. It's not just the, you know, good is good, bad is bad anymore for me. I'm trying to be as compassionate as I can for others, but there just has to be a new way. Mady, you can take it away.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think for us, I mean, we're so new. And when I look at where we were in our approach 10 months ago and where we are today, it is just like radically fucking different. And so when we were new, people were like, you need to tread lightly and try and get people on your side and show them what you're about, and they're going to hop on board. And so we did that. We had conversations with people I would rather not have conversations with. And, you know, they were teetering like, oh, maybe I do care about brown kids. Like, we'll get back to you. And then we were here and we started building those relationships, and we love these kids. And we have kids that, we're coming in every week and are never going to walk in again because of either death or incarceration. And so it like increased the urgency of our advocacy work, and there is no more treading lightly. And so it's like, you're either working with us or you're working against us, and we're just going to name that. And we need you to know we're coming. So I would recommend you get on our side, and if not, like, sorry, you'll keep seeing us. So I think it's like felt good for our team to know, like, this is real and this is valid and this work needs to happen right now. And so we're looking at like class action lawsuits right now, and what does that look like, bringing that to the school. And I think it also helps us like really kind of come to terms with like our traumas growing up here. Everyone that works for us grew up here. And just remembering like, I remember that police officer, I remember that teacher, I remember that principal. And we weren't making it up, even though they told us we were making it up. And so like watching our kids go through that. And so I think, yeah, just similarly, Nisha, like this, like, it's okay to be radical and it's okay to just like name it. And there isn't time, like there's not time to tread lightly. So has been challenging, but I think we're moving at a faster pace and seeing better results. And that's been great.
Thank you. What it feels so beautifully like is pulled through all of your guys' sentiment is like just you have to know what role to play. Like the whole thing about solidarity is I don't have to be the expert at everything. I'm the expert at what I'm doing here, and like I need to know what role to play. And like Nisha, you're right. Sometimes that role is the role that's just the rest, because the rest is what's important. That's going to be able to get me to the next step. And Randy, you know, sometimes it is like I just need to know what's mine, and what's mine right now is not all that nonsense. Like what's mine right now is standing here and focused on this community and like doubling down where it matters most to me and where I can have the biggest impact, and doing that unapologetically and knowing that like the rest of that shit is somebody else's shit to handle, right? Like this is my role. This is how I'm showing up in solidarity for this movement. And then Mady, you also just really knowing the role. That's like the raw role right now is to get loud. Our role right now is to have the voice for all the people that couldn't have a voice, you know, and like, and sure, we're talking, you know, there's another game of playing this on the side, you know, talk to these people. But if we wanted to do that way, or if that way worked, we already would have seen shifts. Like our role right now is to act and behave as urgent as the cause calls for. And all three of those roles are at very different levels of revolution, right? But like to be able to embody that and see that across all the different movement to the work that really is the collective cause for liberation and pull towards liberation is beautiful. And even hearing you all talk about it and like to see that through line is beautiful. So I just wanted to offer that. And then Claire, Fatmah, did you want to talk about any challenges that you may have experienced or perspective you've gained from this year before we move on to the next question?
I don't have anything to add. I think, yeah, I'm good.
Awesome. Fatmah, might you want to talk about any challenges or perspectives that you gained this past year?
Sure. I think I won't get too specific on frustrations. But what I will say is historically, our organization has always been kind of like the go-to responsive organization that speaks on behalf of all youth issues and whatnot. And previously the staff and the people that we used to work here were kind of in that groove that like, you know, we're gonna do everything and anything. And while that's great, it's also not so great because it's exhausting. It's also toxic and tokenizes us as an organization. And I have been pushing back on the idea of Momentum Alliance being the only youth organization or the youth organization, because there's a lot of different people who are doing different things for youth, or our youth just don't have a 501c3 or just don't have the title, don't have the access or the reach. And that's been one of my biggest frustrations within Portland is really big on like aesthetics and big pictures, and like whoever's getting attention, we just run to them because they just know it all. Sorry, my phrasing is not the best right now, but that's been one of my biggest frustrations. And so one of the ways that I've dealt with it as a leader within the organization is just remaining silent. And not feeding into whatever the asks are or the demands are, and realizing that people are running on ego and power, even though they are working within movement work. People still run on ego, and you know they want to fill that ego and feel good about themselves. But sometimes you just got to remain silent and let the world show how people act and do things. So yeah, remaining silent is good. And it's run its course, and because we remain silent this year, there have been other youth who have been organizing who got to be on the forefront. And that doesn't take away or negate our work, right? Like everybody deserves access and resources. So like if we're not in a spotlight, it's not an issue for us. Like we don't need that attention. Everybody else needs that attention as well. So that's been one of the biggest frustrations, but it's working out. I mean, look at these Black youth who have been running these protests in Portland for how long? Almost a year now. And half of them are going off to college and still running shit on the internet. So like, that's what we want.
Yeah.
Organized regardless of status, regardless of organization.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. But hopefully we can get them paid. Who cares if they live in another state? We just want to pay them. make sure they're loved for their work. But that's been one of my frustrations. And we're learning and growing, you know.
I love that. Well, and let's be clear, like silence, the preservation of your piece is a skill set. It's a skill set for that adults don't always have. It's a skill set that a lot of us, either that communities of color and Black folks and Brown have to like have that drag ourselves into, but like this, and it's a skill set that youth people don't always tell, like youth, right? Like the preservation of your piece is important. Your mind, your body, your spirit is worth protecting at all costs, you know? And so like pulling that forward and not standing on that, like I work with you, stand on that. Like if you're not really sure, go back to preserve your piece while you figure it out, while you figure out what your role is to play in this work. So I really appreciate you being like honest. Like sometimes I just gotta be silent because that's what it's called for. So the next question we have that I'll toss to the panelists before we give you all a chance to ask some of your questions, so go ahead and be thinking about them, is what could the most liberated and beautiful world look like to you? Let's hype it up. Somebody can start and then somebody can build on it. Let's just for a second take a moment together to collectively build what the most liberated and beautiful world can look like to us. Where does liberation already exist in the work and in our world right now, and in the community?
Okay, I'm ready. I love this question, and I spend a lot of time thinking about what the emergent world looks like. The Black Liberation Collective, we use this analogy that's really similar to tonight's, how like if we have a North Star, if we're following our compass to the North Star, that North Star is total liberation. And I just want to find out how we can all watch the stars together at night. Like I think in the emergent world, I think of really simple things. Like we watch the stars together at night. People have access to water. There's not harm on the land, which means that there's not harm on ourselves. Violence doesn't exist. I think of so many things. I think of people being able to do the things that they want to, that brings them pleasure. I think I struggle a lot because I think of the emergent world almost constantly. But the one thing that I haven't been able to figure out when I think about the emergent world, where we're free and total liberation is here because total abolition has come, I don't know what role I have in that emergent world. I don't know if I want to farm. I don't know if I want to create art. Like I don't know what that looks like. But I think that I spend so much time thinking about how to get there that it's hard for me to imagine that role. But they're really simple things. They're really simple things. Land is returned. Black people have received their reparations. Palestine is Palestine. And it's all of these beautiful things that has been restored. But I also think it's like restored. And I think Randy had said this earlier. I don't want to go back to what was already there. I think that we can return to that, but we can also create and imagine new things. I think that where we currently are is just like a really small blip in time. And there was so much liberation before this, and there's going to be so much liberation after this. So I want to hear what y'all have to say, because I think about this constantly and I want y'all's voices to live in my head rent free.
Yeah, let's build on it. I think it's popcorn somebody, let's build on this liberated, beautiful world. You coming in, Randy?
I'm coming in because yes, Nisha, okay, whew, I need to come to Idaho, like, and come with the family, okay? Like, I need to come with the family to be with family. I want to read Lavender Wright's mission and vision. So I think this really does build off of what a completely liberated world looks like. So the Lavender Rights Project elevates the power, autonomy, and leadership of the Black, intersex, and gender diverse community through intersectional legal and social services. We utilize the law as an organizing principle to affirm our civil rights and self-determination. Our organization disrupts the oppressive systems that target Black, gender diverse, and intersex communities of color and lead to disproportionate levels of poverty, housing disparities, and gender-based violence, especially among Black and Indigenous people. Our staff, board, and volunteers aim to serve, engage, and pursue justice alongside community members in ways that are intentional and accessible for folks who are underrepresented. While continuing to examine our own experiences with privilege and oppression, we are committed to providing comprehensive support for people at the intersections of gender diversity and anti-Blackness, xenophobia, and racism, disability, low-income economic status, and or experience with incarceration and the legal system. I'm looking for a world where all of that is not needed. Where we don't need.
Facts. Off of you for that one.
Okay. I want to live in a world where none of that is needed. Where we do not have to be dragging to we're not waking up feeling like, ooh, where's this white supremacy going to come from today? Where's this racism going to come from today? Where's this ableism going to come from today? Like I want to live in a world where none of that is at the top of my worry list. I want to live in a world where I wake up happy, where I wake up and I don't have to check my bank account and ask my mom if she got money in her account. I want to live in a world where, the carceral system is not our first response to when, we need to solve our problems. I want to live in a world where, we are okay with being uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be lolly dolly daisies all the time, but like, can you sit with being uncomfortable? Like the many people who are continuously uncomfortable for no freaking reason. Like, that is the world I want to live in. I want to live in a world rent free. I want to live in a world where we all make $100,000 a year. I want to live in a world where we all got healthcare, dental, mental, physical, all of it. Like, I want
Come on, somebody.
Okay, like I want to live in a world where this hair is professional. I want to live in a world where we ain't gotta why are we in people's business? Why mind your business? You know what I mean? Like, why do you care? I want to live in a world where the youth are leading this, where we are looking to the youth and actually following the youth's lead. I want to live in a world where our elders are, at peace with themselves and not, I want to live in a world where curses of generations are done. Like, I want to live in a world where I want to live in a world where we can just sit, look out our windows, enjoy watching the trees grow, and still get paid an hourly rate just for doing that. Like, just waking up and I'm already on the clock of I'm getting paid my rate just for existing. I want to live in a world where clothes are not expensive. We don't care who the fuck Gucci is. We don't care who the hell Coach is. I want to live in a world where we just have clothes and shoes and people who have access needs or get the met just by snapping your fingers. So yeah, I'm in there because I can go on for days. And I'm a popcorn it to Fatmah, sorry. Yes, please carry us home, carry us somewhere.
Don't be sorry, you're good. When I think about liberation and what a free world looks like, okay, close your eyes, because I like to do settings. That ride to the beach, when the sun's just hitting you in the car ride and you're just listening to R&B music and it's just vibes. Nobody's talking to nobody because you're just with your thoughts, you're just chilling. And as you get closer to the beach, you see the sun and you see everybody playing around on the beach, you see how everyone's just so free next to the bodies of water, right? Just vibing, feeling the sand on your feet and how warm that is. I want that to be what liberation is and freedom is all the time. That feeling all the time, every day when you wake up until you go to bed, even when you're sleeping. No thoughts, no worries, no stresses. You're not thinking about work. You're not thinking about shit. You just sleep because your body's exhausted from having joy. And that was it. And you wake up the next day and you do the same thing. To me, that's what liberation looks like. There are no systems of oppression. There are no borders. There are no countries. There are no governments of any kind. There are no weapons. And like Randy said, healthcare for everybody, free salaries to everybody, I mean, a lot of countries do this outside of America where people do get salaries for living. It's anywhere between like $300 to like $2,000 a month. So get with it. People deserve to have money regardless of whether they have a job or not. Everybody's worthy. I think about a world where there are no identities. And I mean this in the most sincerest way, because we live in such an oppressive society where identities exist in order to preserve ourselves and survive. But if you were to think beyond systems of oppressions, do identities even exist? And I don't think that they would, because everybody would just be everybody, just vibing. So I just think of a world where, yeah, we're on the beach and everybody's screaming, having fun. There's barbecue like right next to you. People are drinking over here. People are smoking a joint over there. And there's this family playing with the kids in the sand. And like, nobody's got a problem with nobody because everybody's just having fun. And that's it. Yeah. I'll pass it to Mady or Claire. Either one of you want to share anything?
It's a pretty beautiful world. I'm pretty content there. I think, yeah, just like radical and sustainable joy, and like our young people seeing themselves reflected in all these different positions. They're healthcare providers, and like this decolonized education system, when they're learning from people with the same roots as them, and like no hierarchy. I think, yeah, just adding that in there. But everything you have so far, I'm joining that world.
We love it. We love it. Claire, anything you want to add?
I think that pretty much covers it.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to all the comments in the chat. We love it. It's nice just to think through like what can we collectively envision, right? Because we understand our collective visions are what move this work. So I think the next step we're going to do is we're going to break into breakout rooms pretty quickly. We are going to have a question and answers when we come back, but we just want to give you all an opportunity to reflect on some of the things you heard, amplify some of the things you heard, ask some questions to one another. In the program, there is a little diagram that helps you think through how to ask questions or what kind of questions that might be worth asking in this space. Just another opportunity to turn in, be mindful, think about what that looks like, talk about it in a group, and then we'll come back and we will do some questions and answering. Mano, you want to talk about how people should submit the questions? There's a specific process.
Sure, yeah. I think we're asking people to put their questions in the chat, and then we'll have Andriana read those questions. We'll have 10 minutes in the breakout room.
Welcome back. Hope you all had some good chat and reflections in your group conversations. I was talking about how the song came on earlier, so we just wanted to play it to get it out of our heads for a second, give us a little dance break. So this next step is question and answers to give you all a chance to ask our panel some questions that you might have. If it's directed towards somebody specifically, please put that in the chat. If it's just kind of a general question that anybody answer, you can just go ahead and drop it in there. And while y'all warm up, because sometimes I know, we don't type as quickly when we're put on the spot, I'll start with a question for the panel that we can start with. And that question for you all, one of you, whoever wants to hop in, is maybe Claire, because we started with you last time. What is something that you are really proud of, inspired by, or that has brought joy in your movement work?
Lots of things. I think what makes me most proud is seeing somebody who overcomes a hurdle, and namely what we try to do at ShelterJH is empower people to engage with their local politicians, to speak up at public meetings, to attend public meetings, all of which can be very intimidating environments. And I've been doing it for a couple of years now. So, and, it's part of my job to do it. But what I really want to see is people who, it's their first time doing something like that. And so when I see that that definitely makes me feel hopeful that people, and then especially living in a small town like Jackson or being a small county like Teton County, it's really empowering to be able to have personal relationships with your local politicians. You can have a beer with the mayor, you can take your dog on a walk with the county commissioner. And growing up in Oakland, you know, the idea of knowing the mayor personally or texting with the mayor about some legislation that's being considered is not a thing. So I think that's what made me really inspired to be part of politics in Jackson, seeing people at the grocery store. And I know that could be horrifying for some people who grew up in small towns, but for me, I find it really inspiring, and it makes me feel hopeful because you have direct line of communications with those people, and it helps hold them accountable because you see them and your kids go to school with them, or you know, you have the same dentist or whatever. So that's something that I'm really proud of, and makes me feel proud of other people who take the reins.
Thank you. I love that. I love that. One of the other panelists, something you're inspired, really proud of or inspired by?
I just wanna say, wow, I do not know what just happened with my mouth. I'm sorry. I try to say 2 sentences at once. I just want to say one of the biggest things that I'm proud of is seeing the youth that I know and that the people that I know just survive and live another day. I think we often think about like how proud we are of like big achievements, the next deliverable from the grant, all that shit, which is cool too, but that's bureaucratic bullshit. That's us begging for money. But I'm just proud of people living and surviving. And I'm just honored to like know them and see them live their lives, whether it's with us as an organization or outside of it. We got one of our youth members here too, so I see them and I was just like, I see you. Love you, Aya. Okay, I'm done.
I love this. I think when I think of some of the joys in the last year, or some of the things that I'm proud of, I think of some of the really mundane things. Like I had a comrade from the Black Liberation Collective. We had just like a team check-in meeting, napping. It was beautiful. They said, I love y'all. We can talk later, but I'm gonna go nap. I think that's something that like I have a lot of joy and pride in, because when does a Black trans young person get to do so? So I think of really mundane things, drinking water. I love to see us hydrated out in these streets. But I also think of really wild things, like there have been people who have been, Teen Vogue hit us up because they wanted to hear our voices. The Dr. Angela Davis said she's proud of us and like wants to support us. My auntie who was on here earlier today, Ty Simpson, Cosmo hit her up. TED Talk wants to have a permanent site for her on the website. Like I think of so many just wild things, because so many of us have grown up that like you can be good, just know that you're always Idaho good. Like there's always an asterisk, there's always terms and conditions to that. And we've internalized so much of that without even admitting that to ourselves. I think hearing about the experiences y'all are sharing about just being from a small town, I think that there's a lot of things that we train ourselves to play small. So I think of the really simple shit of just napping, being hydrated in a world that wants to see us exhausted and depleted. But I also think of the big things where just little baby Nisha could have never in their wildest dreams believed some of the things that have happened in the last few months. So I love it. I love it all. I'm really joyous and I'm really proud. Yeah.
Thank you. Randy, Mady?
Yeah, I think, gosh, there's actually a lot to be proud of. I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of our team. I think starting like one of the very few women-led, BIPOC-led organizations in our town and like doing it well and growing rapidly, even though people want to see us fail, like we know that and they're loud about that and they smash our windows and things like, you know, but it's like we're here and we're staying. And like our young people feel safe and like seen and heard in our space. And it's so cute when they're like, you're like me, guys. Like, guys, did you know Maddie's dad's from freaking Oaxaca? Like, me too. And then they're like, so when did you know you wanted to do this work? Because maybe I want to do this work. I've been to jail. I do substance use. Like, I could do it. I could really help young people. We've had kids that come in and just said like they wanted to know what it's like to be in a space without homophobia because they've never felt that in our community. And like those moments like keep us going. Like, I want to be here for you forever. And I want us to change so it's less like crisis and more of just like joy and fun and programming. But for now, like, I'm just proud and happy and like grateful for everyone who invested in us and believed in us.
Period. I'm definitely happy and pleased and proud of a lot. One, still being in this work and not, giving up, but staying in the good fight is definitely something to be proud of. Our direct service program distributed over $70,000 in direct aid last year, and we were able to help 4 of our direct service clients with their rent for 6 months at the beginning of 2021, which is something that was just really amazing through grants, through stuff. I wrote this fucking grant and got it. And so that's definitely something to be proud of. Learning so much about development work. My executive director believes in each and every one of us so much and wants to make sure that, if after LRP, we can take our skills elsewhere. She was like, you know what, you should do development. You fundraise naturally. Why don't you get into development and buff up your resume? And I'm like, oh, sure, I hate numbers, but, believed in me enough to challenge myself and do that. And I ran a whole campaign this month. I ran 2 campaigns actually this month, and that's definitely something to be proud of. I'm proud that, again, I have a executive director that's a Black trans woman, and also is a really good, dear friend. I am proud that, the quality of the work that I do it's not about, the amount of people, it's about the quality. It's about, we had like 12 people or 20 people at our Trans Day of Remembrance event last year. We had like 20 people at our first ever virtual Pride convention talking about, hey, we know everybody's focusing on June, the party, but after June, do you have what you need? I just love the quality of the work that we're doing. I love that, we're driven by the community, we're asking the community what they need. We're talking to the community. We're getting notarized, we're getting notoriety, getting interviews, and people are really amplifying. We have actual people who are partnering with us and not just being like, oh, Black trans, organization, like people are actually in this with us. And one of our, trans siblings, the Chief Seattle Club, which is an Indigenous organization fighting for, all Indigenous housing. They were like, hey, if y'all don't get your housing, we're going to dedicate 10 rooms to y'all, just so you can have a start. And we're like, damn, like y'all didn't have to do that. You already been trying to do this for years. Like stuff like that has just been very beautiful. People just believing in the work, meeting so many people, meeting y'all is definitely something to be proud of. It's just another reminder and affirmation that I'm exactly where I need to be. And it's just, this is just fulfilling. It's definitely fulfilling. I wouldn't trade it. I mean, I would trade it for, a white supremacist less world. But like, until then, no, like, this is the work that I should be doing. This is the work that I love, and I also dropped a song today. I just realized that, like, oh my God, like a lot to be proud of. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Just a lot of blessings,
I love that. Thank you. We had a couple questions come in. So first question that came to me was, knowing what you know now, what would you say to your younger self to invite them into imagining their liberation?
I think I would double dog dare my younger self, because we're competitive out here. I would double dog dare my younger self to be brave enough to come home to myself. I would tell myself to come home to myself.
Love that.
I would tell my younger self, you don't have to make sense to everybody. As long as you just love what you're looking at and what you're feeling, you're fine.
I think I would tell myself, you are built to do incredible things, and you might not see it now, but it's coming.
I love. Claire, Fatima, if you don't, I can move to the next question. If you don't have anything you want to add to this one, that's okay. Okay. What does it look like when you rest is the next question.
Can I say my first thought was, I don't know her. Like, who is Rest? Just being like year one of a nonprofit and going all in, it feels so overwhelming and so much grant writing and reporting and just like figuring things out. But we did kind of have a breaking point a couple of weeks ago. And so our staff is like, we're going to stay after work and we're going to play games. And we have a staff member who's a mixologist. So they made a drink menu with like fire themed stuff.
So do we.
We had some designated drivers. Also hilarious, it was a Wednesday. So we're like, everybody better be here at 8. But there was just like so much joy and like love and it felt restful, even though we weren't resting. It's like it filled my cup.
Something powerful about play. So I believe that.
I guess it feels a little cliche to say that organizing doesn't feel like work, because of course it is, but there are definitely certain parts of my job that don't feel like work. And luckily a lot of what we all do is just meeting with people and talking about things that we really care about. So, that's a blessing. But then there's certainly parts of my job that do feel like work, like talking to politicians that are opposing us, or doing other things that aren't necessarily coming naturally to me. Learning new skills, like development, for example, is not something that comes naturally to me, so that can definitely feel like work. So when I'm resting, I definitely try to unplug. Part of the reason why a lot of people move here to Teton County is we're surrounded by national parks and open land, so it's really easy to not have cell phone service. And that's really important.
A lifestyle. That's about lifestyle. Appreciate that. Thank you.
When I think of rest, I typically think of like a quiet, really tranquil place, which is funny because when I'm actually in rest, it is loud as hell. Everybody's laughing, and like the ugly kind of laugh that comes from like the deepest part of your gut, and there's 8 conversations happening at once, and it's just the most beautiful kind of chaos. And I'm learning more and more that rest and sleep are not the same thing. That's something that one of my comrades in Liberation, ML Daniel, has taught me, that rest and sleep aren't the same thing. So I think of rest as more and more of just that like really loud, silly, carefree, not having to play small or be quiet or watch what we say or how loud we say it. I think of that when I think of rest.
Thank you. Grantee, anything you want to add? Timo, anything you want to add?
I'll just say when I think of rest, I think of no obligations. That's what comes to my mind. And it can be anything and everything, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely no obligations. But the only obligation is to just enjoy the present, and not worry about, oh, what's coming up? I got to get this done because, it's like, no, just block it off. The world will still spin and it's fine. Like, they will be fine. Focus on yourself. So yeah, when I think of rest, I do think of like my alone time, and just thinking about like just me and treating myself like the hottest date, and just really turning yeah, it's been like, yeah, just tend to yourself. Restoration. Oh my God, I love a pamper. I love to pamper myself. Yeah, that's definitely rest for me. And then like watching like a horror movie and then like maybe playing video games and stuff. You know, just doing fun things, returning to my inner child.
So quickly.
I know, right? I know, I love horror films. It's like, you know, cartoons to me, but just like returning to my inner child, you know, and just indulging into those. Yeah. I know that's really weird, but hey, it's me.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. We're nearing the end of our time. I think if somebody wanted to ask one question, we might have it, but if not, we just want to say thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Thank you so much for offering your insights and your story and your personality to the space and to this group. Thank you for calling us together in community and giving us a reason to learn and grow and lean in and join you in solidarity in your movements. I know there's a bunch, Allison has the links she shared with the program has like links to the different sites and all of that in the bios of the speakers. So please feel free to check that out. And we just appreciate all of your time and your patience with us this evening. And we hope you join us on Saturday, October 2nd for the annual celebration with yours truly as the MC. And I'm going to be glowing like Randy. I'm going to put some highlight on and then glow like Randy. We appreciate you all for being here.
I just want to say, be sure to give to all these organizations directly, find out about them and move resources to them early and consistently.
Yes.
You just send us your account number.
Oh, and we just want to say a big, huge welcome and shout out to the new interim ED, Valeriana. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for joining the SJF fam.
Thank you for having me. This was incredible. I literally had no questions because I am just sitting in a pot of humility, honestly. Thank you all.
Thank you.